Welcome to episode number 3 of Step Into a Story. We are here today with my friend, author Patty Tracy Perrin, author of the Tetrasphere Series. Welcome, Patty.
Thank you for having me.
Patty grew up as a military brat, a voracious reader, and she's now writing books in her favorite genre. She writes as PTL Perrin. She grew up in Europe and speaks several languages, from inspirational to native cultures, diversity, mysterious places, and even aliens. What could be more fun? So, Patty, you have one series out called the Tetrosphere Series, and I think I'm pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, you are.
Tell us about that series. What's it about?
It's a story of 4 teens who have been tasked with saving the world from self-destruction, basically. You know, which is kind of the way the world seems to be going now.
Yeah.
So I used a lot of the concepts of what people are calling climate change, strong storms, weird weather patterns, and started it from there, and just kind of worked all of that into the story.
Was that some of the inspiration behind the story, the ideas of climate change?
Well, it was the beginning of it. And I won't say what my views on that are, but in the story, you know, there's a different cause for it, but people don't know that. And the kids have come together in a Cherokee reservation, and they've gone to school. They're now all enrolled in the high school there, and they all have different backgrounds, and different gifts that are highly unusual, and have kept at least one of them very isolated all her life from other kids and other people. She was homeschooled, and this is her first exposure to high school. And it's very different and strange for her. But the story is how these kids were given this task through an ancient Cherokee prophecy, and it seemed that everything is coming together, and these kids are the people who the prophecy is talking about. And so it starts from there, and they have to discover things.
Is it 4 books or 5?
There are 4 books.
Okay, because and my son read all of them. So to all my listeners, we actually roomed together at a book convention in Florida. Was that 2019, February of 2019?
I wouldn't remember.
You don't remember, time flies too fast. Yeah,
really
so, we met online earlier, but we actually met in person at the Amelia Island Book Festival, I think it's called. And so my son read all your books as we drove home from Florida to Minnesota, and he really enjoyed them.
I'm so glad.
I got to hear a little bit about them as we drove. So I was curious, did your book start as a standalone, or did you intend it to be a 4-book series to begin with?
No, I knew it would be 4 books.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, the number 4 is very significant in Native American culture. And so I wove all that, the significance of that into the story as well.
And that kind of brings us to, you're very interested in some of the mysterious places of this world and some of the sort of mysteries of history. How do some of those play in, and what would be some of your favorites or the most interesting?
Well, one of them is the Ayrs Rock in the outback in Australia. And Ayrs Rock is, the name of it is Uluru. Uluru, I found a very obscure reference to that name, and the name meant ancestor, but not just ancestor, reptilian ancestor.
Oh, really?
What that word meant. And they changed it as the tourists began arriving, and I guess it became more modernized, but they changed the meaning of the name to just be kind of a generic name, which is what you find in most places. But I dug a little deeper, and I found that reptilian ancestor reference. And they believe, the Aboriginals believe that the rock is still inhabited by the ancestors.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I was really able to weave that into the story because within the story, I have two alien races. One of them is the reptilian race.
So you
And
drawn that directly from that legend or myth.
that's right. Well, they came before I discovered the legend or the myth, which is how so many things have been happening with these stories, is that I will write something and then discover that it's actually either somebody else's interpretation of something, or they find rock paintings. I see the rock paintings and things of the creatures that are in my book.
Oh,
So,
wow.
yeah.
Oh, wow. That's kind of wild. So what other mysterious places have you studied or worked into these books? I think Atlantis is one.
Atlantis is one, and I've always been fascinated with Atlantis. Plato had actually done a drawing of Atlantis the way he envisioned it, and they have kind of thought Atlantis might have sunk off the Bahamas because of the Bimini Road, which is something that divers have found, and it looks like a man-made road leading somewhere to the Bimini Island. Yeah, and
That
so
is amazing.
they found some pretty interesting things in the Bahamas, and it's right smack in the middle of the Devil's Triangle. So I put Atlantis there in the tongue of the ocean off the coast of Andros Island. And it just made sense that that's where it would be.
Right.
So they have found crystal pyramids in that area that have been debunked, but we all know that sometimes things are debunked that really are true because they don't want people to know about these things.
Well, this kind of brings up a connection you and I have, that we both grew up in the military. And so, I won't go into detail, but yes, I definitely know, because of my background as the daughter of a military officer, there are a lot of things that the general public does not know.
They don't want us to know. Yes.
Right. And I think sometimes there are good reasons for that, some of these things. If you dismiss people as, a conspiracy theorist or whatever, no panic. But it is interesting to think about and talk about. Like I said, I know that there definitely are things that the general public just doesn't know. So you've done a lot of research for this, even though, would you classify your book as sci-fi or as fantasy, or kind of a mix?
It's kind of a mix.
Okay.
Yeah. And I have done a ton of research and enjoyed every minute of it.
What sorts of things do you research? Obviously, some of these mysterious places, because I think most people would be like, fantasy, you just make it up. What's to research? But what sorts of things, in addition to Atlantis and the Ayrs Rock?
Well, there's the everlasting lightning storm in one of the South American countries, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's a lightning storm where there are thousands of lightning strikes every single day, and it's a real place. They don't know why it caused what causes the atmospheric disturbance there, but I made up a reason for it, and it works within the context of my book. And there's the crystal cave that they found in Mexico, where the crystals are so large you could drive a bus across them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you ever consider writing a book that details, like, I think one of the books I ended up putting out was what I call Not a Cookbook, where I go into some of the fascinating history behind my story. Have you ever considered doing that, where you actually tell where you're drawing these from and that you're not just making this all up?
I don't know, maybe.
I would love a book like that, because I was just talking for my Books and Brews program to Oscar K. Shaheen, who writes pirate tales set in the 1600s. And it was really interesting talking to him about what's true in his story versus what he made up. So I think most people would assume that you just made most of this up, and it would be really fascinating to see you're not.
Yeah.
Where this is coming from.
Well, I kind of disguise my descriptions of these places, so that it doesn't look like someone's actually being educated about them.
Okay.
And yet, I do add enough details to where they could actually look them up themselves if they were interested in that.
Do you use different names for them then?
No, No, I call them what they are. The
Oh,
play,
okay, I misunderstood that then.
yeah. No, the
So,
play. Yeah.
you write about these kids who are very smart, very intelligent. They have some unique abilities, but they have some problems and issues too. So why do you think it's important to write characters who do have flaws?
Because we're people and we all have flaws. And when you're talking about teenagers, those are just magnified because
Mm-hmm.
they don't have the life experience yet to know, that things are not nearly as bad as they seem at the
Mm-hmm.
moment. And
Mm-hmm.
so yes, they do have problems, and some of those problems aren't resolved through most of the books, but
Mm-hmm.
they also lead them to some really interesting situations.
Mm-hmm.
know,
Does
for example, when in the first book, no, in the second book, and I had to do a ton of research about this because I am not a diver, and yet I write a lot about diving,
mm-hmm.
both with scuba tanks and with rebreathers. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to do a ton of research in that, and I was very happy that a friend of mine who is a diver, actually was a SEAL,
Oh,
um, said that I had gotten my facts straight. And
uh-huh.
I wrote them in there not as facts, but as a part of the story.
Right, just what
Yeah,
happens. So,
yeah, exactly.
does this also kind of end up being a tale of coming of age and personal growth in addition
Yes,
to the adventures?
yes, it does.
Which I think
Because,
adds a lot of depth to the story.
yeah, well, the kids, they're teenagers and
Mm-hmm.
they're given this monumental task that they don't want,
Mm-hmm.
and it frightens them, and they
Yeah.
don't know whether they can do it. And
Mm-hmm.
as they learn, as they do these things, and every time they have a little victory, they think, okay, well, maybe we can, and that conviction grows. And then they find out in one of the books that the task is virtually totally impossible. There's no
Mm-hmm.
way that they could possibly do what they were told to do, what they
Mm-hmm.
need to do. And so now they have to figure out, well, how can we do that? And in order to finish the task, all of the different races that I introduce in these stories have to pull together, or
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to happen. And there's
Mm-hmm.
always the villain who wants to put the kibosh on everything. He wants
Yeah,
to stop
right.
it all. He thinks that he thinks the human race, he's from one of the alien races, he thinks the human
Mm-hmm.
race is totally inferior, and
Mm-hmm.
he wants to eliminate the human race.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and understand that by doing that, he's eliminating his own as well. And so,
You missed that detail, huh?
yeah, I don't think he ever really gets it, but everyone else does.
Some people
And
don't.
no, but yeah, and the kids fall in love, and there's that dynamic in there. They're 17 years old. They're all the same age. They were all born within minutes of each other,
Oh, wow.
different parts of the
I
world.
take it that is a plot point.
It is a plot point
Okay.
because it's one of the things that indicates that they are the four in the prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're, with being all the same age, one of them had lost his parents. He was angry all the time.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is a little know-it-all and kind of figures that she's already made up her mind what she wants and that she's going to get it one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of them are a little less dynamic in personality, but they're more, let's say they're just more open and easygoing, and yet they also have their issues. So everyone has issues.
Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I'm a pantser all the
How
way.
does that work?
Oh, it's just phenomenal. I will be doing something totally unrelated to writing, and all of a sudden I will get this plot point that
Mm-hmm.
I had not ever thought of, was not a part of the story, and yet works and has to be
Mm-hmm.
there. It's just a complete surprise to me. So
So you
even the
sit
end
down
was
and
a surprise. Yeah.
yeah, right. And I've talked to other authors about that too. In fact, I think Di Price, who was episode number 1, that I didn't know the ending of my book for sure, my whole series, up until I was maybe a page away. And then I was like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Up until then, I thought it could go either way.
Sure.
So, and I think you had a similar experience, didn't you? Like
Absolutely.
the end of the book?
Absolutely. I just did not know until the end of the book how it was going to end.
Were you
And it was
surprised?
totally different from anything I had thought of or even led up to, and yet it worked. It wasn't one of those hallelujah moments, where, oh, suddenly somebody comes in and saves the day. It wasn't that way. It actually worked within the context of the story.
And I think that might kind of lead to the idea that you believe God wrote this series in partnership with you. And I think when things just work out like that, there is a part of your brain going, I couldn't have done that on my own. But what is it about the book, about its message? Why do you feel that God was a participant in this book?
Before this one, I wrote a book that was a nonfiction, and it was snippets of my life in light of scriptures. And then this came to mind, and I just wondered, am I supposed to write something that's fictional? Because it is not a blatantly Christian story. It is not. There's message. There's mentions of Jesus. There's mentions of the Creator, but only not as the integral part of the story. So I had to ask him, do you really want me to write something that is completely fictional like this? And he showed me a scripture. He says, I created you to be a creator, and so I felt right then that I was in partnership with him. He created us in his image, and that means his attributes, and he is creator. And so, okay. And it just made sense to me. And then as I went along, all these ideas that were coming into my mind, I saw some of them as actual visions. And I thought, this did not come from me. This is no part of me. This comes from outside. And I knew that God had planted those in there. So I think he has as much fun writing fiction as we do. Honestly, I think he does.
Kind of speaking to that point, I don't know if this kind of goes along, but I felt a little bit the same when I would be writing things. And this speaks to what you were saying before, too, that you write about something and then find out it's true. I would be writing, and I'd write, a little incident, and I'd say, oh, I want to keep this really, really historical. So can I find, and it was incredible, sometimes the tiniest little details I would find, yes, historically, that actually fits with what I just wrote. So like there was a scene where they're trying to get from, I believe it's Carlisle in England, back to Melrose in Scotland to report what they found while spying on the English at Carlisle. And I had to have somebody at Melrose Abbey in Scotland who had some clue. And it turns out, sure enough, the exact month where this scene takes place, a bishop from Melrose had been in Carlisle for the election of another bishop, which was wild because England and Scotland were at war at the time. And yet exactly what I needed. Historically, it happened.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I mean, down to the details I need.
Isn't that fun? I mean, that's what makes me totally believe that God was in partnership, because there were so many surprises that could not have come from my own hand or experience.
But, I have an interesting observation as I've been doing my Books and Brews interview for, officially I've been doing it on and off since 2017, but we're now on like episode 20 of the podcast, or 18, something like that. So I've interviewed a lot of authors for Books and Brews, and it seems to me that a surprising number of them did grow up in the military, as you and I both did. Remind me, was your dad Air Force?
He was Army.
Army. Okay, but you lived in Germany too, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I grew up in Germany and Italy.
Okay. By the way, I meant to ask, what languages do you speak?
German, Italian, Spanish,
English,
and I think there's another one I can't remember.
You speak a lot when you can't remember. Do you think that it's just kind of dumb coincidence, or do you think that there is some reason why a lot of military brats end up as authors and writing fiction?
Oh, no, it's no coincidence at all. I think because we grow up in such a diverse world, we get to see so much of different cultures and things as our parents uproot us and travel us around. We don't have a chance to grow deep roots, but we do have a chance to experience lives that most people who grow up in this country do not. And so it expands our minds. It gives us an appreciation for different cultures and different places. We get to see so many historical places like Heidelberg Castle there.
Which is behind you. Yeah.
Just behind me. I grew up, well, I lived for a while just 2 blocks down from there, and we played in that castle and in the grounds.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Playground.
Yeah. And, you know, I think too, you do mention in some of your writing about your upbringing that you didn't really have TV. So I think, like me, if you had TV, it was in German, right?
Yes.
Yeah. And so for me too, I didn't necessarily watch a lot of TV because up until we moved back to the States, which I was a little bit short of my 6th birthday when we did. So I wasn't that old, but we didn't have TV in English. And
Right.
I think that plays into it too, that we're living such a different life from the average American child.
Absolutely. And books were a lifeline for us. Libraries, you know, I haunted the library. I was there almost every day, and I'd bring home stacks of books. I'd read them, a lot of them, and I'd read them rapidly. And my parents never watched what I read. They weren't monitoring my reading. So I was reading some very adult books at a young age and understanding them and wanting more of that, and not necessarily bad books, you know, or I didn't read erotica or anything like that, but the books I read had advanced vocabulary, and there were many lyrical works that I read, and so it expanded probably a certain area in my brain, and probably the same for most military kids, you know, where words are just, I don't know, they just
I think
make pictures.
Yeah, and as you said, we're constantly being uprooted. So typically a military family, usually they're going to move in the summer. So, you know, every 2nd or 3rd summer, you're the new kid, you don't know anyone, so you read. You go into you know, a creative fantasy world maybe, because you don't have your friends. You know, you might be the new kid in school. I think too, just an observation, probably as military kids, I bet we learn to observe people more because we're always the new kid having to look and learn and figure out how am I going to fit in this school. Go from Germany with all military kids to one of my schools was in kind of the deep South in Virginia during busing. I've lived in the North, I've lived in the South where people were shocked that I said thank you instead of thank you, sir, you know. And all these different things, and you realize you have to really pay attention to people and understand them and adapt to them. And I was just talking with somebody who this came up, that in order to write good fiction, you do need to observe people, you do need to understand people.
Yeah.
I think that that's probably something we get growing up in the military, more so than maybe some other people do.
True, I would agree with you.
Survival thing.
Yeah. And
So
also the fact that we read so many books, you get a feel for how a good book should sound, how a book should be. And so when you switch to writing them, it just becomes a little easier, I think. It gives
I think you're right. And you have a memoir out too called Reflections of a Misfit. Tell me about that and kind of the history of that book.
Yeah, it started as a gratitude project. A friend of mine started, I guess this was in November 1st. They kind of challenged us to write something we're thankful for every day during the month of November, Thanksgiving month. And so I did. I would write something I was grateful for and expand on it a little bit. And since I read the Bible every morning anyway, you know, the Lord was reminding me through the scriptures of different things that I had forgotten. And so I wrote those down, different experiences I'd had and stuff, and I shared them on Facebook. And it wasn't long before people were saying, you need to put these in a book. And when my husband finally said, you know, just sit down and write the book, you need to do that. You know, that's what I did. And that's how that first book came about. I didn't stop after a month, by the way. I was boring my friends to death by doing it every single day for a solid year. And but it gave me a lot of material, to assemble into the book.
And I think, didn't you pull it from publication and do some revisions too?
I did all my books that way, yeah.
Okay.
They were published and I revised them because as a writer, I am constantly learning how to write better. I have wonderful mentors in my writer friends. I belong to a couple of really great writer groups and critique groups. And as I learned from them, I realized, I need to tighten this up a lot. And so I pulled all of my books from publication and I revised every single one of them. And now when I go back to read them, I see things I could probably revise again. Yeah.
And that's the danger, I think, as authors, especially if we really strive and are able to be honest with our own work, we'll never quit editing.
We'll never quit. No, true.
One of my clues that I thought, this book is ready to go out was when I was doing, read through number 928, started quibbling with myself and actually really debating, should I use the word path or the word trail here? Oh, wait a second, this is stupid. If I'm done quibbling over path or trail, I think it's ready. Yeah. And yet I know if I went back today, I have no doubt. I have absolutely no doubt I'd find things that I would say, I could do that better.
Sure. We learn. We're constantly learning. You know, the beauty of it is that it keeps you young when you're constantly learning.
Yeah. Well, what is next for you? You have done this 4-book series. You have I guess we'd call it a kind of a gratitude memoir. Yeah. I think you're working on something now.
I am. One of the characters in the final book of the series fascinated me, and I wanted to see her develop. And so I'm writing another series with her as the main character.
Will it take place concurrent with their adventures or before or after?
After, because in the final book, she's a baby. And so this is her growing up.
Okay.
And I use some of the same characters because they all know each other and some of the same places, because they have to find an answer. She's abducted into a different dimension. And in that dimension, what she did on Earth to help them save the Earth had the opposite effect in that dimension. And so there's a very evil character who runs it, and he wants to destroy her, but not just kill her. He wants to just destroy her. And so there's a lot that goes on there, but concurrently while she's in that dimension, the people at home are trying to rescue her. What she doesn't know is that there's a time anomaly, just like there is in Atlantis, for example, in the Devil's Triangle, in the Bermuda Triangle, there are time anomalies. And so in this dimension, the same thing is happening. So it's going to be a little confusing at first. It's confusing me. I have to keep spreadsheets of everything. Every minute that passes in one is a different time length in another. And,
yes, that is going to be tricky. So will this also be a 4-book series?
I'm not sure yet. Okay. I think this is, I'm away from the whole concept of the 4. So now it may be a 3-book series and it may be a standalone. I really, at this point, don't know. You'll figure it out as you write, huh? Exactly.
So how far into it are you?
I'm on chapter 14. So, yeah, about a fourth of the way through.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I wish I could say the same. My book is nearly done and I just can't get back to the editing these days. The next one I'm working on, but that's a long story. So where can readers find you?
I have a website. It's easy to remember. It's PTL Perrin, Perrin, and that's all one word, .org.
Okay.
And on that website, I have all of my books listed. I have trailers for some of them, and my bio's on there. They can go from there and order the book from Amazon.
Okay, fantastic. And do you have Twitter, social media, anything like that, or do you primarily do everything through your website?
No, I have a lot of social media stuff too. On Facebook, I am author Patty Perrin.
Mhm.
Look me up. I'd be happy to friend you. I have a PTL Perrin page on
Mhm.
Facebook. So that's kind of the official author page, I guess. And you can certainly look things up there, look me up there. On Twitter, I'm PTL Perrin. I'm PTL Perrin just about everywhere.
Okay, so you're easy to find. And I'll put those links in the box on the video too, so people should be able to easily find them. So thank you for being my guest.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting me. Appreciate it. And I love your questions.
Thanks. This has been episode 3 of Step Into a Story with Patty Tracy Perrin.